Good morning, everyone. Thank you to those of you who are attending this morning. We're going to go through the keratinite life cycle and also why sometimes barrier repair is not enough to fix a skin. So the recording of this will be available for about a week, and then we will be taking it down. So I'm going to just welcome to those of you who are here and just do a quick introduction for those of you who do not know me. So my name is Jacene Greenwood. I am hyphenating it shortly to Greenwood Drummond. I am the founder and CEO of Rococo Botanicals, and I'm also the founder and CEO of Educated Therapists, which for many of you, you are already in my existing Facebook group. I'm a cosmetic chemist. I'm also an esthetician or a beauty therapist, as they refer to us in Australia. And I also have a Bachelor of Nursing, along with many other diplomas, which I won't list here. So that's my background. I've been in the industry for nearly 27 years now, and my passion is absolutely skin. So the barrier function of the skin is designed to actually act as a barrier to prevent things from actually getting in, and also to keep moisture in the skin. Now, over the past 3 years, we've seen barrier disruption like never before because of mask wearing. One, because of the physical trauma of the masks, but also two, because it's actually changed the actual microbiome of the skin, and it's also changed the actual bacteria on the skin, and the resulting inflammation from that has been an ongoing problem. Now, for those in the medical industry in particular, they are still having to deal with this because nurses are still having to wear masks quite regularly. And I'm an ex-nurse, and we never had to do this unless you're in like a contagious or environment, whereas this is now standard for the majority of nursing staff. So we're just going to go through the actual normal process of a skin cell moving up through the layers. So we've got our basal layer, our spinous layer, our granular layer, and our cornified layer. And the cornified layer is the layer that's actually acting like an exoskeleton to stop moisture loss, but also to actually prevent pollens, pollution, and other things actually from really getting into the skin. So in the basal layer, we have our proliferation. Now, our stem cells for keratinocytes are unlimited. Even though I don't peel, you cannot not get keratinocytes. They are going to repopulate. I've never seen anyone become old and suddenly not have skin. It doesn't happen. They are able to be regenerated easily. However, the keratin's in that layer, and you can get disorders of keratin with a lot of skin conditions, are keratin K5 and K14. Then as you move up your layers, as they progress up, you will actually have keratin 1 and keratin 10 being formed, and also caspase 14 is expressed. Now, caspase 14 is responsible for helping filaggrin to actually form, and filaggrin is the skin's natural moisturizing factor. And if we don't have it, we will get barrier disruption. So what's interesting with it is with people who actually suffer from eczema, they don't have enough caspase 14. So ingredients that do actually activate that will assist with, in particular, people who have eczema. So K5 and K14 are expressed in the basal layer, and keratin 1, keratin 2, and keratin 10 are in the differentiating cells. However, what actually happens is when the epidermis gets injured in any way, whether it be from a pathological condition such as psoriasis, or maybe it's a scratch or some other way, what actually happens is your keratinocytes can become what's known as activated. And that will actually lead to a whole pile of growth factors and cytokines being released. And one of those is interleukin-1, which causes hyperproliferation. It also releases tumor necrosis factor alpha and transforming growth factor A and transforming growth factor B, as well as interferon gamma. So with conditions such as acne, we have different keratins being produced in the skin, and they're not normally present in a normal skin. And these keratins are produced when keratinocytes are activated. Now, for those of you who don't have an in-depth knowledge of acne, I can tell you the number one cytokine involved with it is interleukin 1A. And interleukin 1 activates the keratinocytes, and they will then start to produce keratin 6, keratin 16, and keratin 17 proteins, and they are not present in a healthy epidermis. So anything that has a hyperproliferative disease has these keratins involved with it. Now, normally what would happen is these keratins become involved and they will actually help to basically re-epithelialize the injured area and to repair it. However, the challenge is when you've got things like interleukin 8 being constantly activated in the skin, because the actual acne bacteria can activate them as well, it doesn't really ever shut off. And therein lies your problem. And we're going to go through this in a minute, but that is part of the reason why barrier repair doesn't work for acne. So we're going to go into this in more detail. As they actually come up the layer, your keratinocyte will end up becoming a corneocyte. And so we're going to go through to this next slide here. So as it starts to come up, you'll actually have your filaments starting to form, your keratin filaments, and they, the keratohyalin granules are produced by your keratinocytes, and they will actually produce profiligrin and loricin. And they will actually bind, and they will eventually become part of what's known as our corneocyte envelope. Now, your corneocyte envelope is what gives the waterproofing capacity of the skin and acts sort of like an exoskeleton as well. And again, with people who have things such as psoriasis, they don't have the ability to form filigrin. And the reason why that they don't have the ability to form filigrin is because the skin cells are turning over way too fast. So normal cell turnover is anywhere between 14 to 28 days. Traditionally, we were told 28. In a younger skin, it would be 14 days. In an older skin, and when I say older, I'm not talking 50 because that's even longer again, but for an older skin, I'm talking anywhere around 25, 26, our turnover starts to slow down. And this has impact for wound healing, because if it takes longer to regenerate, it means anything that you're doing that is ablative is going to take longer for it to heal. So if you space things too quickly together, you're going to end up having massive barrier disruption to the skin. So with psoriasis in particular, because they don't have time to produce filigrin, and it's because their skin cells are turning over every 1.5 days instead of every 28. So the analogy I use for this is, if you were to bake a cake, it normally is in there for about 45 minutes. And the top of the cake will be the crust, and the inside will be nice and soft. And that's how it should look. But if you were to put the cake in the oven and pull it out after 5 minutes, it's not going to have the ability to form any crust. It's going to be very mushy. And that's exactly what happens with psoriasis. Because the challenge is filigrin actually takes time to form. And when skin cells are actually going through really, really quickly, you don't get the chance for it to form. And so therefore their skin barrier is disrupted, they get hyperproliferation, they get extreme dryness, extreme redness as a consequence of it. So psoriasis is easily treated. Barrier repair works for psoriasis. The reason why it works is because psoriasis is a deficiency of filigrin, in particular in the skin. There's also other cytokines involved, but if you target filigrin production for psoriasis, you will actually get it under control. Now, this is a client that was 4 months of treatment. And you can see the massive difference. She had it all over her body, but psoriasis is one of the conditions that is incredibly effective when you use barrier repair. For most barrier repair actives, you're looking for something that has ceramides, cholesterol, and your fatty acids. However, you're not always going to see that on a label. So I can tell you now with our brand, you don't always see ceramides, cholesterol, and fatty acids. However, we have actives in there that stimulate it in the skin. We do still contain ceramides and fatty acids, but the best ceramides are the ones the skin actually produces itself. And the same with cholesterol. Anything the skin produces is naturally going to be more acceptable to the skin than anything that's actually added. Even skin identical ceramides, which we still use, if the skin produces it itself, then it will accept it much better. There are some instances, however, where the skin is physically not capable of doing it, which is why we also add them in as well. For those of you who have not seen guttate psoriasis is on the right. It's an incredibly resistant form of psoriasis as well. So it's not your classic psoriasis in any way. The other thing that works really well for barrier repair is eczema. Now, eczema is actually most often not from allergies. Eczema, only 30% of it is from immunoglobulin E, and that's allergy. So that's when they're eating something, they're allergic to something. That is 30% of eczema. The majority of it is actually a genetically faulty skin barrier, which means if it's genetics, they have to be doing something regularly to prevent it, or it will come back. So when it's genetics, you'll see it showing up in families. So I get eczema. I get 2 types. My daughter gets eczema. My son gets eczema. My other son gets contact dermatitis and hay fever. Thankfully, none of them get asthma. My granddaughter, who is 7 weeks old, has eczema. So there's a strong familial history in our family with allergies and eczema. So that's where your genetic tendencies are. You need to be looking for things like, do they get hay fever? Do they get asthma? Is there any family history? Because I will guarantee you it's most likely genetic. And with genetic, if they do nothing to prevent it, it's going to degrade. So these type of people need to be using something consistently on their skin, or it will literally just break down. This is actually dyshydrotic eczema. And again, dyshydrotic eczema is intensely itchy. It can occur from contact dermatitis as well, particularly to hand soaps, or you see this often in a lot of hairdressers as well, because they're using chemicals. Even though they're using gloves, some people are allergic to the gloves as well. So eczema is really easy to fix, like really easy to fix, because it's essentially they're missing ceramides in their skin. If you replenish ceramides, cholesterol, and fatty acids, it's really easy to get on top of eczema. The degree of inflammation is just the immune response of the skin. So the more severe the eczema, the stronger your anti-inflammatories need to be in order to counteract it. So this is often when you look at, when are steroids used for eczema? It's when it's a severe flare-up. So, and that is partly why we have different levels of barrier repair products for those clients, because we understand that you are going to have flare-ups and you're going to need something that's a little bit stronger. So I'm just going to go through, why doesn't barrier repair work for acne? Now, acne, for a start, is not from a disrupted barrier. Acne is also, in general, genetic. Now, you will have teenagers go through a period where they can get teenage acne. That is caused by a hormone called insulin-like growth factor, which they produce when they're teenagers. And that makes insulin resistant to being absorbed. However, it's transient and it's temporary. And this also happens during pregnancy, which is why pregnant women can suddenly be breaking out where they never used to be. You can also have things during pregnancy like gestational diabetes. Again, that doesn't mean the person's diabetic. It's something that occurs only when they're pregnant. So acne is not from a disrupted barrier. What generally happens is the sebum output increases and the actual composition of the sebum completely changes. And because the composition of the sebum changes and they tend to have higher oleic acid in there and the bacteria are feeding on it, producing more oleic acid, which is really barrier disruptive, as a consequence, they get barrier disruption. And for many many companies, the way that they treat acne is by using actives that are drying. So if you were to look at, for example, benzoyl peroxide, it's highly effective, but it's also very drying and irritating. Now, that can be dependent upon the percentage that is used. However, it's a known fact, it dehydrates the skin, and it also causes more interleukin-1 to form. So acne is not from a disrupted barrier. And so if you are targeting acne from a barrier repair first, you're actually just delaying them healing. A good acne product should have barrier repair as part of their product range anyway, and every acne client should be doing barrier repair inherently without having to add or focus on barrier repair. You can focus on repairing the barrier and also the acne at the same time. The other reason why barrier repair doesn't work is because of a thing called biofilms. And for anyone who did not see my webinar a couple of weeks ago, please message me and email me, and I will gladly send you the recording. Biofilms are a sticky exoskeleton glue that are produced by not only bacteria, but also by fungi and yeast. Now, the challenge is once they start to get established, they're really incredibly difficult to remove. So if you've already got a barrier disruption occurring in the skin and a biofilm is there, when you try to repair that barrier, that biofilm's not going. It's still there. So repairing the barrier doesn't do anything to address a biofilm. It suddenly just doesn't disappear if you repair it. So that's why it's problematic. And I'll go into this even more detail with seborrheic dermatitis, because fungi produce and Malassezia and yeast produce far more biofilm exudate than bacteria, which is why they're so resistant to treatment. The other challenge with biofilms is the longer they exist, the less the actual actives or antimicrobials that you're using are going to work. So that's where you get things like bacterial resistance to not only antibiotics, but to actives, where they just don't seem to work anymore. And it's because they haven't removed the biofilm. So barrier repair is not going to fix that. Also, barrier repair doesn't reduce sebum. And, you know, without testosterone, you really don't, it's impossible almost to get acne unless it's friction, because our sebum output is strongly linked to the amount of acne that you're getting. Now, I've never seen a super oily skin where they don't get the occasional clogging. And the reason why I say that is because the more sebum that's outputted from the skin, the less linoleic acid is available inside that follicle wall, because it dilutes it. You don't make more linoleic acid. And so when that starts to drop, the inside of that sebaceous follicle starts to scale, and you are going to get clogging. Now, the other thing is, once it starts to scale, you'll actually get biofilms attached like no tomorrow. And the analogy I use is, if you've ever gone and got fake nails done, the first thing they do is roughen your nail up to make the glue stick. So when you've got a disrupted barrier and the inside of the follicle wall is scaling, and then you've got bacteria producing biofilm, it's the perfect recipe for acne to form. So barrier repair does not have any impact on sebum. What does have an impact on sebum is heat. If you get hot, it's a known fact that sebum output increases. What generally happens when a barrier is disrupted is the skin can feel oily. It's usually transepidermal water loss. It's generally not increased sebum. But it comes across when you feel it like they're incredibly greasy. And I have seen this on lipid dry skins who think that they're oily, when in fact they've just been using soap for their face and their skin is so barrier disrupted, it's actually losing moisture, and it's usually dry and feels like sandpaper, and they think they're oily, and they're not, and they're stripping their skin when in fact they should be doing the complete opposite. And it's so easy to turn around those types of skin. Barrier repair also doesn't change the type of bacteria on the skin. So we know with acne, there are different strains on the skin versus a normal skin. In fact, there are strains that exist on a normal skin that are completely absent from an acne client. So it's not going to change that. Definitely when the barrier is disrupted, the microbiome does change and opportunistic pathogens can take over. But with acne in particular, there is already different strains on the skin. Barrier repair or barrier disruption just makes it worse. It's not going to alter the strains that are there because they were there in the first place. It also doesn't change the immune response in acne. So for the majority of acne clients, the severity of the cysts and the inflammation actually have to do with the immune response, just like in rosacea. So for people who have allergies in particular, and another thing is most acne clients have high histamine levels. So high histamine actually causes increased sebum, and histamine is involved in allergies. So barrier repair is not good. If you've got allergies, you've got an immune response going on. So barrier repair doesn't change that. So it also doesn't affect DHT or dihydrotestosterone, which is your very active form of testosterone that is directly responsible for hormonal acne and the majority of acne. So repairing the barrier has no impact on that. So barrier repair by itself does not work in managing acne. So this is one of our case studies, and this is from Stephanie in the United States. She's actually one of our clinic owners. Now, that was a 6-month period. Now, can I confess, if the client had followed her instructions from the very beginning, that period of time would have been much less. But as we all know with acne clients, they don't do as they're told. They often don't want to give up things that they shouldn't be eating. And so it took a lot longer to get this client clear than what it should have. This is my own son here. And you can see the reduction in literally just 4 weeks of acne. And again, one of the other things that barrier repair doesn't do is it doesn't actually stop bacteria from communicating. So quorum sensing is involved in acne formation as well, and barrier repair doesn't have any impact on that whatsoever. The other thing it doesn't work for is rosacea. And I bring this up because I've seen this time and time again with clients, particularly in Australia, where products are sold by companies that they treat the barrier and they treat rosacea. They're quite two different things. If all you needed to do to fix rosacea was give them a ceramide dominant cream and a barrier repair cream, we wouldn't need a rosacea range, but it doesn't work like that. So why doesn't it work for rosacea if you're just doing barrier repair? So it doesn't reduce what's known as antimicrobial peptides. So with a rosacea client, they have an overactive immune response. And so instead of responding normally to any potential perceived pathogen, it literally sends a full-on immune response to anything that is even remotely considered to be dangerous. It's like a smoke alarm going off when you haven't even put the toaster on. That's the only way I can describe it. And the challenge with it is every time it releases these antimicrobial peptides, it causes vasodilation, which is going to increase the amount of blood flow. It causes capillary leakage, and it generates inflammation. So when you repair the barrier, that doesn't stop the overproduction of antimicrobial peptides, because whether or not the barrier is disrupted, even if the barrier is not disrupted, the skin is still producing antimicrobial peptides. It's part of the skin condition rosacea. So it also doesn't reduce stratum corneum tryptic enzymes. And stratum corneum tryptic enzymes, particularly one called kallikrein 5, actually makes the epidermis really shaky, and it literally dissolves like your hemidesmosomes in the skin. So what's actually happening when we go out in the sun is we have this massive release of your stratum corneum tryptic enzymes, and that makes the skin really fragile. It allows the skin to lose moisture, and repairing the barrier has no impact on that, because the moment your client's out in the sun, they're going to be produced anyway. So you actually need to be targeting both of those things to fix rosacea. It also doesn't reduce Demodex. So again, Demodex is a mite that is found on every skin, not just rosacea clients. Every single skin has Demodex mites, just like every skin has acne bacteria. And in fact, acne clients have less acne bacteria than those who actually have acne. Go figure that one. The difference is the strains are different, but everyone has Demodex. Now, again, Demodex actually has bacteria called Bacillus oleronius, which is sitting in its gut. And when Demodex die, because they have a very short life cycle, they actually just die on the skin. And it is the bacteria that generates this immune response. And this is what antibiotics are targeting when they are treating rosacea. Now, it's the immune response again that is the cause. It's not the actual Demodex. It's the way the skin is responding to it. And fixing the barrier doesn't change an overactive immune response. It might stop the external things from getting in, but it will do nothing for an internally driven genetic condition. And that's the major, major difference here. This is genetics. Rosacea is genetics. Acne is genetics. Sebderm is genetics. So the other thing it doesn't do is it doesn't have any impact on the production of vascular endothelial growth factor, or VEGF for short. And the reason why we get capillaries or telangiectasia in rosacea is directly because of vascular endothelial growth factor. So that is going to be produced. And repairing the barrier does not reduce the amount of VEGF that's produced in the skin. So you're still going to have that occurring with a rosacea client. And as I've said, it doesn't reduce telangiectasia either, and it doesn't stop flushing. So in order to stop flushing, you need to target alpha adrenergic agonists, and big mouthful, I know. And the flushing is part of the problem, because every time the skin flushes, you have an immense amount of blood flow that's coming to the area, and it's causing pressure on those very fragile capillaries to start with. And then generally what happens is those capillary walls get really weak. And so you'll have exudate going through it, and that causes surrounding inflammation. So the redness that you're seeing in a rosacea skin where it's just on the cheeks, which I'm just going to show you now, that's actually because there's been so much flushing there that it's leaked through and caused surrounding tissue inflammation. So without strengthening your capillary walls, without reducing the ability of those capillaries to flush, and the reason why they're flushing is because of alpha adrenergic agonist receptivity in the skin. If you can't stop flushing, you'll never stop rosacea. You need to be able to control it so that it's not flushing as much and decrease the amount of flushing that's occurring in the skin. So with rosacea clients in particular, the way we would treat them is quite different for papulopustular versus someone who has diffuse telangiectasia. Papulopustular in particular as well, they have almost like acne-like lesions, and those skins in particular I've found need a high concentration of cholesterol, because if they don't, they never fix that barrier up. They can never get it under control. So again, we have two different products for rosacea because they're two different conditions. We don't treat them the same. And last but not least, why doesn't it work for seborrheic dermatitis? So for those of you who don't know, because I did post this on my page publicly the other day, and I will share my photo in a moment, during the pandemic recently, everyone has had compulsory mask wearing, and we had it introduced in Queensland where I live in Australia, and I wore it, and then I started gradually getting this rashy type thing on my face. Now, I didn't really think anything of it until it got to the point where, and I'm just going to show you the photo, it got really bad. And So when we were going through this process, I tried everything on my skin because when it was on the photo on the left, it was actually excruciatingly painful. My nerve endings were on fire. It was incredibly itchy because it's fungal related. And I also had it going into my scalp and my hair. Now, if barrier repair was all we needed to fix seborrheic dermatitis, then barrier repair products should have fixed it. And can I be honest, they did absolutely nothing. It slightly reduced the inflammation, but it certainly did not fix it. And we trialed in the end nearly 10 formulas to get that result on the side. And even up in April, because it's now August, even in April, I still had really bad seb derm. I went to the Australian Society of Cosmetic Chemists conference and my skin was still a mess even then. It didn't take much to flare it up. I just had to get hot and it was like flared up. And eventually we hit on a winning combination of actives that actually got it under control. So I want to share with you what I've learned about seborrheic dermatitis because it's actually quite interesting. What I didn't realize, because I also get rosacea as well and acne, but predominantly it's rosacea. What I didn't realize was that not only is Demodex involved with rosacea, it's also involved with seborrheic dermatitis. And I found that quite interesting because when I was trying to treat it, I would get incredible itchiness. And the fungi is one of the most resistant things that I've ever had to treat. And the reason being is because they massively produce biofilms. Like you can't even compare it to the acne bacteria. They are like copious producers of biofilms. And the challenge is the longer that condition stays there, the harder it is to remove because the more biofilm is produced. And so I tried all of these antifungal actives and they did not budget. In the end, we ended up doing a whole pile of actives, but one in particular called pyroxenolamine. And pyroxenolamine is basically, it's a strong antifungal. It's used in some products for dandruff. It's actually used in the veterinarian industry as well for animal mange, which is again, fungal. So it was the only thing that really started to make a difference with it. However, here's the thing, that wasn't enough. So one of the other things with your seborrheic dermatitis is I'm actually not that oily anymore because I'm 52 this year. But any amount of sebum that I was producing, it just latched onto it and it just created havoc. So what actually happens with seborrheic dermatitis is if you're just trying to fix the barrier, you're never going to get on top of it. And the reason why is because the Malassezia are feeding off sebum and they eat that sebum and they produce massive amounts of oleic acid again, which can cause acne, but in my case, it just disrupted the barrier, resulting in incredibly red, irritated skin. Now, if you were to go and look online, you will see that there are many blogs out there saying avoid vegetable oils. Can I tell you that is an absolute disaster of advice? Because I did try that too. And all that happened when I stripped all of the oils and the ceramides out of my routine was my skin actually got even worse again. Because not only did I have this Malassezia here, I had no way of correcting the barrier function of the skin. So I used vegetable oils throughout my entire treatment. I just used the right ones. And every study currently that they refer to on these blogs online, can I tell you, is in a petri dish. That is not real life. That is not skin. That is not how skin even interacts, because on a skin, you have multiple microbes that are interacting with one another. So you cannot possibly compare anything to a petri dish. So barrier repair doesn't reduce sebum. One of the critical things with treating seborrheic dermatitis is reducing sebum. If you take away the food source of your Malassezia, they can't reproduce as much. Now, you can get other actives such as your ceramides and your cholesterol that will repair the barrier, that the malassezia aren't going to eat. In fact, things like phytosphingosine or ceramides are antifungal and anti-inflammatory, which is why they're so good, not only for acne, but for anything that is a fungal related condition. So without a strong antifungal, you will never, ever get it under control. And this has been one of the most interesting experiences, having had it, because every time I thought I had it worked out, bang, it flared up again. And I went, oh, okay, I haven't got this worked out yet, because it would start to clear and then there'd be something that triggered it again. And with seborrheic dermatitis, they do know that there's some gut microbiome dysfunction, but there's not really a lot in the literature with regards to diet. The only thing that came up was that they said, don't eat a lot of fruit, which I don't anyway. But there was nothing else that seemed to be related to it. The other thing with seborrheic dermatitis is the barrier function of the skin changes rapidly with heat. The hotter your skin gets, which of course occurs with mask wearing, the barrier of the skin actually alters, and because you're sweating. And for anyone who's ever had kids with eczema, you see that. You see it in the creases of their elbows and their knees where sweat pools. So the moment you've got heat and sweating, the barrier function completely changes the skin. And that will again flare up seborrheic dermatitis. Whilst you can repair the barrier, you can't stop them sweating. And so it's important to actually remove the triggers, that even if they do sweat, you've got the barrier function in there, and you've also got the actives that are necessary for treating seborrheic dermatitis as well. So I'll just go back to my photo. So this all up was, I had it for 12 months, but the photo on the left was in December, and the photo on the right was basically the end of July. And it's taken an awfully long time to get it under control, where I have no scaling. Some of the lesions, interestingly, looked like acne, but they weren't. So eventually I started getting like little lumps, and it was almost like a folliculitis, basically, in the follicle, which was fungal. So I'm just going to go through our next webinar, and if you have any questions, please pop them in the box, is in 2 weeks' time. And what we're going to go through is we're going to go through how our products are vastly different to any other product on the market. It'll be the same time, and I will pop up a link for registration shortly. Actually, I will just pop that in the chat box now. Let's bring that over there. So that's the link for the next webinar if you would like to register. And the other thing that I did want to share with you all is that for those of you who are interested in also advancing your education as well, we will actually be in America in September for those of you who are in the US, and we are there for an entire month. So we have 4 trainings that are going over there, and basically we will be going through our entire range and how you can effectively treat every skin condition that comes through your door. So if you would like to learn more about that, please let me know. If you do not have any other questions, I will wind it up. Does anyone have any other questions? No, not by the look of it. If you do think of anything after, please, just going to stop sharing. Please let me know. And I will look forward to speaking to you guys again. We are having another webinar again in about a month's time, which will be on cosmetic myths, which we will also be posting. So thank you very much for joining us all. I know for all of you, it's on a Saturday in the US, it's Sunday here in Australia. And be well and take care, and look forward to seeing you all soon. All right, bye.